Hey everybody, it's Simone. I am so excited to be here today with John Rhodes and Bella Krystal for this third part of our Architecture of the Soul series. And thank you so much for joining us today. In this session, we're going to access the archetypal intelligence of human consciousness stationed in dimensions 4, 5, and 6 to explore the perspective of soul identity embedded in human form. So if you've been following us along, we've been on this journey of digging deeper and deeper, going deeper and deeper into the layers of human consciousness. So just as if this is your first episode you're listening to, you can find John Rhodes. He is a teacher of John. Why don't you share what you teach and what your background is?
Sure. So I teach essentially dynamics of ascension, and that's a particular perspective about the human consciousness experience at this time. And one of the ways that I engage with that is through a program I call Awakening the Heart. So it's essentially a process of being able to become in deeper contact with who we really are.
Beautiful. And our other panelist today is Bella Krystal, who is one of the co-creators of the 64 Doors and Unlock Your Design. And our series is being sponsored by 64 Doors and Unlock Your Design. And you can find Bella at the Living Matrix, 64 Doors and Unlock Your Design. Bella, would you like to add anything today?
Oh, we can't hear you, Bella.
We can't hear you. There you go.
Is that better?
Yeah.
I don't have much to add, but I feel, similar to what John was saying, coming back to the center, coming back to who we are and being able to embody that in our soul consciousness walking on this earth. That's what I care about.
Fantastic. So what we're so excited about is when we started this series, we wanted to have a conversation. And what was the conversation that if we had a table, a community, what are the things that excite us? And so looking at the layers of consciousness and really digging deep into that has been super exciting. And so many of you have reached out and said that you're enjoying this conversation. So we welcome you to our table. And we hope that you will participate through the live comments and join in the conversation as we go. Where would you like to start tonight?
Well, I actually thought that perhaps just in case there are new people who are new to our conversation, I could give just a couple minute sort of catch up on the context of where this conversation is taking place.
I love it.
Awesome. So we're talking about human consciousness from a perspective that recognizes 12 layers of human consciousness. And when we're talking about a layer of consciousness, it's kind of like an aspect of experience. And the way that most people relate to the 3 layers of experience that most people are in full connection with is our physical experience, an emotional experience, and a mental experience. And from this perspective, those 3 frequency layers of energy will describe the 3D experience that we're having, the 3-dimensional experience. And the idea of accessing the aspects of human consciousness that are not yet fully embodied is kind of what feels really exciting in this conversation, because we can learn about things that we may be experiencing that we don't know how to define, and we can also begin to imagine what it would be like to embody the aspects of human consciousness that we may be gaining access to now or developing access to in the near or distant future. And so in your introduction, Simone, I know that and for those of you who don't know Simone, she's going to be the one out of the three of us who is directly accessing that intelligence from the human consciousness. And the dimensions of 4, 5, and 6 make up an aspect of human consciousness that we could call the soul identity. So when we refer to the soul, we can be referring to the layers of consciousness that exist in that area. So hopefully that is a good just kind of recap of what we've been talking about.
Yeah, and of course, last episode we were speaking about those 12 layers, and we were going through them. So that's of course somewhere to go back to, because today we're really going to tap into the part, I feel like, where it was so natural to go there. So I'm also curious about what's going to come out, because that was not what we had planned in the beginning, but then last conversation, just like that's where we're going. So I'm wondering if we should start, because I almost feel like there is a bit of a left-brained way of doing it and a bit of a right-brained way of doing it. And Simone, your way of bringing it in is where you're completely open somehow, and it comes through. So last time we did use this approach of like systematically speaking about the layers from 1 to 12 and going through them. So I'm wondering if we should dive in today and just see what comes through, and then afterwards maybe speak about it and see how what is going on, maybe even ask questions. So Simone, do you want to tell us a little bit about the modality of how it works, or what is the best way of introducing what it is that you're going to do with us today?
Oh, fantastic. How exciting. So what I'm really great with having an open G center is that I have no judgment, and my dial, if you will, of being able to transmit and receive frequencies is open. And so I just have to point my tuner to whatever layer of soul consciousness that we would like to communicate with. And then I'm quadraclarient, and so my tools are clairvoyance, claircognizance, clairsentience, and clairaudience. So I don't know when I open up to the frequency, I don't know what I'm going to receive or how I'm going to receive it. And that's another part of my gift, is that I don't have any judgment about how what's on the radio dial, if you will, and I'm, one of my gifts is that I'm able to communicate that signal in a purity of consciousness without judgment. And so all we have to do is get really specific about what's, where are we dialing into? What is the frequency that we're dialing into? And so, if in our second episode, one of the things I love about John is how clear and specific he is. And so we talked about the dimensions of 4, 5, and 6 as layers of consciousness. And then when those 3 layers work together in that soul identity, he actually he labeled it a density of consciousness. Mm-hmm. And so what I want to do is be really precise about where I'm tuning into. So am I tuning into the density of consciousness of layers 4, 5, and 6, known that we identify as soul identity, or is there a clearer way for me to tune in? Because that's what's important to me. I want to go to the place that we intend to go, if that makes sense, to that vibration.
Yeah, perfect.
So did I get it, John, or is there a clearer way to?
No, you are speaking about it perfectly clearly from I appreciate Bella's, what Bella just said is this is a left brain perception of the experience that we're having and the frequencies that exist in this range. And, obviously, from looking at it from the density perspective, which is the three together that exist together as a whole, we can be, each of us, each as an individual, can be in different stages of relationship with these layers of consciousness. So there may be someone sitting next to you well, maybe not so much right now because of what's been going on, but I was going to say sitting next to you in a public place. But there may be a stranger that you were to encounter who is currently embodying aspects of consciousness from maybe just the fourth dimension. And there may be someone else that you come across who's embodying other aspects of consciousness from the fourth and fifth dimensions, and then so on and so forth. So in Simone, in what you're saying, are we being clear enough? Obviously, there are ways that from this description that we can hone in on a specific layer. But from this 12-layer perspective, looking at this density 2, I think it will provide us with a really wonderful look, because for each person who's in a different stage of development, we'll be able to relate to the information that you're going to access in an individual way. And it will take on meaning that way.
And part of what I love, and Bella, jump in here, is that you were talking about the field that we're in relationship. And I believe that when we're together, like that we're a collective, communicating, and that my capacity or bandwidth is exponentialized by being in a resonant field, even though we're, it doesn't matter that we're non-local, if you will. But I believe that our community, and everyone who's sitting at our table right now, and everyone who is going to sit at our table in the future, and everybody who has sat at our table in the past, I believe that's all coming together. And I'm covered with chicken skin, so I know that this is, I'm so in love with how you bring us to this place and what you shared, because I believe we're all coming together to access this consciousness, and it is the collective that we're working with, who's ready for this, that is, anchoring in. So. Before I start, Bella, do you want to add anything? Or
there's just this precision that you were making, John, when you're speaking about the density. Like, why are we speaking about the density? What is important in speaking about density and not just the frequency, or like what was it? Because I remember you saying that last time. What is it that is important with that?
Well, the mechanics of frequency and the way that they function in our experience is that each density of 3 layers of experience are separated from each other by what's called a magnetic repulsion zone. It allows for the grouping of consciousness for the experience and expression without having to experience the totality of all that is in one experience. So from the perspective of looking at consciousness in an evolutionary paradigm, it allows for an incremental evolutionary experience that can be integrated and re-expressed through new creation in a way that allows for a deep richness of experience. And so, for instance, if we were to have access to all 12 layers of consciousness, without having a body that's capable of creating with all of those layers, the body would simply be unable to hold it together and would essentially explode apart. And when that sounds pretty weird, but if you look at the way quantum physics functions and how really anything solid in our experience is about 99.9 for some amount of repetitions percent open space, the connections between the actual matter is held together with some pretty mysterious way of relating with each other. And, science has different ways of describing that. But so the best way that I can answer that question, I think, is that the separation of these layers of three allows for a gradual integration of higher and higher frequency on our own evolutionary path.
Mm-hmm.
And, we could probably spend every episode talking about the ramifications of what that means. Why are there separations between each three layers, and how will that affect our experience? But from my perspective, what's happening, one of the questions when people talk about ascension a lot is, why are we jumping from 3D to 5D? And when I was describing the consciousness layers, we have access to all of the layers that we've fully integrated that are at a lower frequency than the station of our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So if our consciousness is stationed in dimension 4, we really can only create with the first 3 dimensions effectively. We may be exploring ideas about love or suffering from love and all of these things within the 4th dimension, but we haven't reached a state of consciousness where our experience is fully stable in the entire spectrum of that 4th dimension.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people talk about ascension as going to 5th dimension, is because the consciousness of the planet, as well as the humanity that is connected with it, is moving to a station that is able to have access to the entirety of that second density layer of consciousness.
Mm.
So, from a left brain perspective, we're saying, okay, there's these hard and fast delineations between things, but each person is a whole being that is exploring different aspects of themselves in relationship to their own frequency resonance. And so when you get to that 5th dimension, then it can be said that consciousness has fully shifted into what we would refer to as density 2 in human consciousness. Does that make sense, Bella?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, it's going to make even more sense afterwards. But I mean, I kind of wanted to say with that, the mathematical kind of left brain, so we map it out, and now it's going to be very different quality. And I feel like at the end we're going to weave both of them together. So I feel like that was a good foundation for it. So I feel super ready now and super clear.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Well, let's do it. I would like to communicate with the density of consciousness, with the dimensional layers of consciousness 4, 5, and 6 we know as soul identity. Will you communicate with me? And the first thing I feel is I'm in the void, and there is the sensations of my screen is black. I feel the expanse, and there is a shape that goes like almost like the shape of a bugle, but it's sideways. And I can feel and sense in my body and hear almost like wind, just massive amounts of movement. And I'm asking this density of consciousness, what would it like us to know? And what it does is it explodes out, or in a sense bursts. If you can imagine like a whale blowing out of its blowhole another whale. And so in a sense, there's that bugle-like geometry, and it blew out another bugle-like shape. And I'm asking it what it wants us to know. It's just like infinite. It birthed another one. And it was a fractal because there, and this is what I'm, able to perceive. It's like there's that bugle-like shape, and it birthed another one. And then when I asked it what it wanted us to know, so those two shapes birthed two more, and then the little one birthed another little one, and the big one birthed another big one. So the exponential nature of creation is what I'm perceiving. We can all perceive from what we get, from the. And now what it's doing, it took all of those births of consciousness, and it spun them, almost like imagine the rings of Saturn, or a disc, and it just took everything into a disc form, and it changed the vibration of everything. It's as if all of those constructs, all of those vibrations working together became some other vibration. And it's just like, first I heard, if you can imagine the vibration of Om in the void being everywhere, it brought that sound through that whole geometry. And then there was this amazing laughter. And I'm like, I have tears in my eyes. It's so powerful. And it's saying that we want you to literally see that your capacity for creation is infinite. And it's talking about the glue that holds things together. So let me really get the message, as complete as I can hear it, or, perceive it. The glue that holds the universe together is you. It's your consciousness. And it got really peaceful. Like, that's what I wanted you to know. Like, it feels like complete, like, and it's, so I'm just asking it if we can, have a conversation, and if it would, be okay with that. It's like, of course. It almost, my screen is all black when I'm seeing this. So the shapes are just like, imagine stirring coffee, a dark coffee, but you can see that it's moving. That's what it looks like. But it almost like sat in a chair and crossed its leg, like, it's having a seat at the table with us. So where would y'all like to begin?
I love that one of the first expressions was directly related to one of the things that came out of my mouth in describing the connection between the aspects of matter at the quantum level that are held together, and that offered the perspective that it is in fact you. You are the glue that holds those things together. So I think that's pretty incredible to offer that directly. And as within a physical body, we begin to experience more and more of the perspective of soul identity. How from the perspective of soul identity would you describe that experience of integration?
Well, first thing he says is good question. And the second thing he wants me to talk about is he wants to share that. So when we see pictures from out of space, it's like where the horizon and space meet, there's this blue, this vibration of blue.
Uh-huh.
And he wants me to describe that as he's sitting, that his outline is that layer.
Mm.
And there's something there to be known. I'm not sure what it is, but when it's that powerful, he wants me to say that. So I'm going to say that. And I've forgotten your question, so I'm going to just let him talk because it's not for me to, And so what he's showing me is it's almost like imagine space and we have a TV or we have a computer and the signal travels through the atmosphere and somehow pixelates into form. And now I was just seeing like in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the kid who wants to move, and we see all the little pixelations. And so it's like he's showing me that traveling through space. And then the closer it gets to embodiment, those pixelations get closer and 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 closer as we get into physical form.
Mm.
And he says that each of those, as you say, pixelations, as you label pixelations, have vibrations. And they're distinct. And yet they communicate in a harmonic whole. And he says, I could do this forever with you. That you, in your human perception, see it as coming together and coming together. And there's a point in the human capacity to see where it looks like it's together. But when he says, I could do this with you forever, he just keeps going in and in and in. And it like gets closer and 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 closer. It's infinite. We think of the outside of us as being infinite. But he's showing that we just can't perceive the infiniteness of those, what I call pixelations in my descriptive word, in my description, that they come together infinitely. So as much as we see, we can imagine here into, different galaxies of consciousness, there's that capacity within. And he says that it is in view of embodiment It is the capacity for you to wrap your minds around that potentiality, capacity of going in. He said, you could live lifetimes and never go completely in. So that it's, it's infinite. As infinite as you are, you can, go in. And he says, does that answer your question?
I love that the perspective being offered is an answer to the question and is completely free from the preconceptions of my own ability to perceive the frequencies of what we're referring to as soul identity. And what that brought up for me is perhaps not the same question of wanting a more clarified answer, but an expanded question, which is if I've understood the answer that was offered, in that we can integrate infinitely within. There is an infinite amount of exploration available in the bringing together of these different layers of consciousness that we experience. And because of that principle, my perception is that it is equally true the opposite way, as in we can expand infinitely also outward into what we might term higher layers of consciousness. In fact, all of it is just permeating itself infinitely. So the question is, from the soul identity perspective, is there any perception of delineation between its own frequencies of consciousness and that of the frequency layers of consciousness that a human might experience, as we started off our conversation today saying the physical, the emotional, and the mental? How would the soul identity perhaps differentiate or maybe even unify the differences in the experience that from my perspective are seem to be present?
Well, as you were talking, there were a lot of images coming through, and so I'm going to share those with you to set the stage, and then we'll see what else he has to say. So if you imagine that bugle that we saw and the 0 point field of the center would be the center of a torus, if you will. And so you just identified, okay, well, he's talking about going in and I'm talking about going out. So then you can see that the inside of the toroidal field, right? Mm-hmm. So he says you have the capacity, the more you go within, it's a reciprocating capacity. So when you can go in, then you can match that. There's a reciprocity about where you can expand out. Mm-hmm. And he says, the reason is that you're here in physical embodiment. When you're in non-physical, you have all of the access to, it's oneness. It's, but when you're in physical, the goal is to go within. And the more you go within, the more you can expand out. There's a reciprocity in capacity, if you will. And he says, But what I think you're really asking me is, why can't I go to the 12th layer of consciousness right now in physical form? Or what is my capacity to go to that resonant vibration? And he says, I don't know if it's you or if it's like the collective we're talking to. It's like, he understands that people want to know,
Mm.
And he's saying that one answer is, he goes, I have many answers. One answer is that you can. It's just that you don't have an awareness of it. And most people don't have an awareness of it in physical form. But he also says that it's not the purpose of embodiment. The purpose of embodiment is to be able to explore going inward, because we can't do that without the physical vessel. And so he says, what I would encourage people to do is go within, experience the reciprocity. And he says, that is where the vibration of bliss is. That when you unlock for yourselves the journey of going within, at each of those between spaces that you described earlier, there is the capacity for the awareness of a resonance that is, some might say bliss, some might say peace. It is the fulcrum of what you've done or where you've been and where you are going. Imagine a diving board, and the diver runs and then pushes down to take the dive. That second before the meeting of the downward and the upward has this potentiality. And in those spaces, that's what you experience. You have the energy of everything that you did to get to that point, the diver running and, in a sense, pushing on the diving board. And where you're going is when the board pushes you out into that next level. And so he says it's if we go back to the toroid, it's that meeting point. And then if we go back to the bugle shapes birthing, it's there, And he says that in those places, internal pressure is relieved for a moment. And he says those incubation periods are essential for the next leap. It's the true resonance within your field of what you've just come through. So when you truly are resonating that in your physical, your consciousness together as a collaborative sacred union, and then you use that incubation period, and then he says, then that's when you springboard into the next level of consciousness. And he says there are many people who want to just go to 12, but it's truly about the journey, that it's through each of those journeys and then experiences, and then that that moment is so powerful. And it actually, when he first showed it to me, I thought, oh, it's almost even like that moment between that rests between the exhale and the inhale, where that alchemy, you're not really exhaling and you're not really inhaling. It's that resonant feel right between the two. And that's what that space right between those two pressures really feels like. And he says to me, as I've been relating what I'm receiving through my channels, there is a bit of trepidation in me because I want to get it so precise, And he just said, and you're doing fine. So, like I always tell on myself. So, like, relax, you're doing fine. You're getting it. And he says it's a building process. He says, if we came back and had this conversation again, there would be an expansion in the communication, because just going through this the first time, you're building a resonance with me, like you, as in everyone who's part of this conversation. Our collective is building a resonance. And he says you would more fully, you will continue to more fully understand my cueing, and he says it's a process. And then he says, he kind of turns back to you, John, and he says, does it make sense?
Yes, I am understanding what he's sharing, and it is giving me an idea of the creative process of communication between that which is physical and that which is non-physical. And in my understanding, my own individual aspect as a soul identity is present within this layer of communication that you, Simone, are sharing with us by contacting this consciousness. And one of the ways that I have gone, or at least that I have understood this process, is that these layers of frequency that comprise the consciousness, I guess location, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but it's essentially the frequency expression, the range of frequencies that express the consciousness. In the physical body, we experience this very solid range of frequencies that we call the physical experience. And then there are these sort of less physical experiences that cause physical effects that we call emotions. You can't see or hear or even touch emotions, but we can feel them in our body. And then our mental experience, we have thoughts that, I think a lot of people might go back and forth as to whether or not thoughts are real things. But from my perspective, they're a part of that creation process that was being described, in that a thought is like a birthed form of a frequency that we are in resonance with experiencing in some way. And I'm wondering if there are particular experiences that can be defined within the layers of consciousness of the soul, that within our physical body, when we are open to the exploring of this soul aspect of our own consciousness, how it might shift or cause our perspective to change, to experience different things. It's kind of less of a mechanical, less of a mechanical question in that how does it work from a birthing standpoint of new energies expanding, and more of a what is the subjective changing that may be available as a result of this going within process that you've been describing.
So fascinating, because while you were talking, when you first started talking, I saw the divine, like he's a masculine energy, a feminine energy came into my screen, and they sat together. And then I could see other energies, like a collective coming, and it's almost like a circle. And so they say it's the well, and the other thing they want me to tell you is that when you were talking, they showed me your field opened up and your heart poured out. And they were recognizing the outpouring of your heart. And so they wanted me to share that before I go into what they would like to say, because they feel it's important in your understanding. And they say that in that process that I was describing, where the pixelations were coming more and more closer and closer and closer together, it's really of the totality of consciousness is the male and the female aspects that you understand. And they say that it's the sacred union. It's not male and female as in man and woman, but male and female in perfect union. It's like, then they show me the cell at birth, the perfect union of those two cells. And they say the more and more that beings in human physical form go within, the more experience, access, understanding, awareness that they have of these parts of self, the masculine and the feminine. And they say it's when a being, a human being, a human in physical form, they don't really like the word human being. They're like, a being in a physical embodiment. The energy, they're even more precise, the energy of physical embodiment. It's even, that's a real precise thing they're saying. The more you go within, that you feel the connectedness of self. And it's like the DNA and the RNA cannot be separated, and still you claim I'm a being in a physical embodiment. Another way to say it is, the more you access that, the more a person on the journey is able to access the DNA, the RNA, the masculine and the feminine, the more fully their expression, the conscious expression in physical embodiment is. And they say it's really more like a remembering or an awakening, it's all there. But some people have some consciousness in physical embodiment, have more access to the DNA, and some have more access to, in a sense, the RNA, and some are working on a balanced engagement with the energies that are in union. So they say, yeah, you can pick away at the DNA or the masculine. You can pick away at the RNA or the feminine. But the real gift is understanding those energies as inseparable vibrations. That's where the true gift, the true magic, it lies, in terms of awareness of consciousness, bringing more of the non-physical into physical form. Each and every consciousness in physical embodiment has the perfect union within them. It's accessing it, being aware of it, uncovering it, that the real fruit lies, if you will. And the more and more, they're saying the more and more you experience your physical expression of consciousness through the heart, you are able to, in a sense, really start going within. Because within the heart is the point of access, if you will, that allows for the fullest expressions of those energies. And we know that's hard for some people to wrap their heads around. Because some of you who are listening are going to think, oh, that's so female, or that's so, you'll have this label for it, but that's just the experience that you've been able to so far have. When you, with integrity, and when they say you, they mean all of us, when with integrity, your intention is, I want to experience the full expression of male and female within my heart consciousness. You will draw to you the experiences that allow your awareness to bloom. And it's almost like I feel in my body like they're crying with the completeness of, it's like the completeness experience of experiencing DNA and RNA together. And it's as if it's compassionate and bliss, compassionate and passionate all at once. And it feels like such a release to be able to infuse that vibration amongst us, within us, between us, if you will. And now I'm having the experience of all the other energies that kind of moved into my screen when I said to you that the female came in with the male. It's like a celebration occurring at the level of consciousness. That's, and imagine that the the consciousness that came in created a circle, and that circle started spinning, and the force of that spin, the centrifugal force of the spin of love, is like lifting the male and the female up. Really beautiful.
That's immensely satisfying to me.
Bella, how about you?
Well, I feel like we have circled back to what I was hearing first. So, I mean, it's amazing. And what I was hearing is we are the glue. And what I feel like the whole conversation now came back to why we are the glue. So I remember from last conversation when we were speaking about the soul and identity and the layers 4, 5, 6, we were saying, okay, what are those layers? They're loving presence, they're Krystal compassion, and they are unity consciousness. So these are the layers that we're speaking about. And today in the conversation, it's because if that's if these are the layers where we are working, basically it's all about love and it's all about sacred union. And then it's saying that it's taking that together with, or that into the physical body, and the physical body is the exploration. So basically we can't do it without the body. So of course, like, we are the glue, and it's at that level of our makeup, you could say, that we are doing that. So that's the first thing. It's like it's making sense, and that's why I wanted to mention those layers that we went through last time, to see that they are all about sacred union. They're all about love. They're all about presence and compassion. So that's the first part that is really exciting to me. And the other part, Simone, is part of what we were speaking about the other day, that what I feel is coming out now at the what you just said. And this is the thing about the feminine and the masculine. And it was important to say it's not male and female. It could be RNA and DNA. And it's basically speaking about it in so many different ways to make us understand that existence is made up of polarities. So one pole and another pole, and like the relationship between them. And also how we can see each of the particle and antiparticle. Either one can be feminine or masculine. And I really loved the last part about compassion and passion. So I'm like, okay, so male are having compassion, and then passion is Shakti. So male is, the masculine is compassion, and the feminine Shakti is passion. And then I'm like, well, the masculine is eros, is passion, and then the feminine is compassion, is like embrace. And it's like, it's really what I feel, what I'm hearing is really speaking out this new way of like really wanting us to understand what sacred union is, what polarities really are, and to see that it's not like the solar masculine and the reflected feminine, or the moon. It's like it's either way. They're like, depending on where you look, and it doesn't matter what's the particle and the antiparticle. What matters is the relationship between them, and that's what I feel. And when they come together, it's also the ascension. We are thinking of dynamics of ascension. Like the last part is like, when it comes together, then we have the Merkaba, and then we start that ascension. We're saying the lift, a celebration, a lifting of consciousness, and that's the vehicle. So there's even not point to go to the 12th dimension before we have created the vehicle to go there, because there wouldn't be anything, like, it's like too far-fetched. There is no, so we need the glue, like we need the physical body from level 1, 2, 3, which is the physical, the emotional, the mental. And when we come up in the higher, the 4, 5, and 6 that we've been speaking about, in this layer of density, then we are finding the sacred union. We're finding the Christ consciousness. We are finding the sovereignty. And from that sovereignty, that's when we can build a vehicle. And maybe then the 7, 8, 9, and 10, 11, 12 are going to become something we can have an experience in. And I feel like that's part of like what we're learning about spirituality or ascension right now, is that without starting from there's a reason for the first layer, and without including that. So these are spiral dynamics. That's the circle that is ascending. The first layer is included in the 6th layer, because it's about the spiral. And the spiral, if you cut off the tail, it's like it's cutting off his tail that is beautiful. So I'm feeling a lot of integration, and I was feeling a lot of energy. I could barely sit still. So it's like, maybe there's the heart that is opening in John, but I can barely sit still because there is so much energy. And in the density of the physical body, when we know how to use that energy, it's like there's so much energy. And that's what I'm dealing with. I'm like, and it kind of has to come out some way. So thank you for like letting me share, because I was feeling like I didn't know what to do with the energy.
Well, they are like thrilled. They were like, bravo, bravo. And what they really, really love about what you shared was the importance of that first level. That without that, there's no traveling through the other layers. You don't come into embodiment not embodied. It's like if you skip the first layers, it's like you didn't quite make it into the physical form. In that pixelated picture, you just kind of stopped before the physical embodiment. And so they said, this is so important, because they said people want to just fly out. They want to just fly out. They want to just fly out. And they want to bypass 1, 2, and 3. And, they want to bypass the levels. And they're saying, when you're in for the density of consciousness 4, 5, and 6, it's a little easier, but you need that experience. That in a sense, we go back to that pixelated image they began with. That's the grounding of the consciousness in the physical. But what they say is, it's how you move through 1, 2, and 3. You all get to choose. It doesn't have to, like, you all get to choose when how you experience 1, 2, and 3. But it is a journey and a process. And bypassing the embodiment part is a fruitless journey, they say.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, from that perspective of this density, what is the biggest challenge for humanity now in terms of the first 3 layers? Of course, we can see them as one density, but we can also see them as the physical, the emotional, and the mental. So would they speak to how they see, or he sees, if there is a distinction, or what is the greatest challenge within the first density for the collective today?
Well, they say it relates to something that John said in one of our earlier conversations. Why do bad things happen to good people?
Mm.
They say that many humans many consciousness in physical embodiment perceive that bad things are wrong, that hard things are, why me? A scientist in the lab will come against a challenge, and they use inquiry to figure it out. Why did this happen? What were the mechanics? What are the pieces and parts? What did I do? What were my actions? What did I use? What tools did I use? What chemicals did I... Instead of going to a place of wrongness, it's a place of discovery. And what we would say to humans or beings in physical embodiment is that when you are in the middle of something that you perceive as challenging, we ask you to seek the union within you, to examine the pieces and parts from a place of discovery and not from a place of wrongness. To look at where you are, to look at where other people are, not from a place of making you or anyone else wrong, but from a place of, how did this fit together like this? What is there for me to know? What can I discover? And from the place, they're saying, we're not telling you to leave your heart. or what you perceive as your heart. Have your full experience. But the more you discover, as opposed to blaming, wronging, judging, that speeds up the process. So it's how you go through those layers that is a part of the mix, if you will. And they're saying you didn't all come into physical form to speed through 1, 2, and 3. Some consciousness really wants to enjoy the experience of 1, 2, and 3. And things that some perceive as challenging, their souls are relishing. Relishing. And we say to you, embody your experience. Don't separate it from it. Embody it. Be in the fullness of it. If there's pain, you wanted to explore what that felt like. If there's joy, you wanted to experience what that felt like. If there's sarcasm, if there's creaky joints, they're throwing all kinds of things at me. You wanted to experience it. And don't make yourself wrong for the journey that you planned. Don't make others wrong for the journey that you planned. And love yourselves as much as you love others. Accept, allow, acknowledge the DNA, the RNA of you as much as you do others. And you will see your journeys through the first 3 layers are bliss, or not only are they inevitable, but their capacity to unify and awaken you to the inevitability of the DNA and the RNA, the male and the female working together, will open up to you. And they're like, really embrace your physical experience. It's the only place you can have this experience. So and they are just taking me like into the heart of different individuals and then showing me, it's like I'm journeying. It's as if it's like I can experience the space in individuals' hearts that they've opened up to. So I have both the awareness of the whole energetic field of the heart, and I have the experience of the pieces that, you know, within that construct that people are open to, and how what they just talked about, it's an expansion of awareness of the actual totality or unification of that field. And while I was in individuals, I was also having the experience of the collective heart. And they're saying, you see, it's not so different. You know, like in the collective heart, we haven't opened fully to the collective heart. And so there are places that are lit up, but not the whole. You know, we don't have the awareness of the whole construct of the collective heart, just like we don't have the awareness of the construct of our own individual hearts. And the more that each of you expands your own awareness, the more the collective heart expands, the access to the energetic vibration of the collective heart.
Mm.
Beautiful, huh? And they are just so, like, in the void that I'm in with them, it is so peaceful. It is like one of the most peaceful vibrational experiences. For me, that's like floating in the ocean, you know, where it's just as if I can feel the heartbeat of Gaia. I can feel the water on my skin and the air on my skin, and that experience of all of those dimensions at one. That's the closest. Well, the other thing is hearing the cosmic Om. That's about the, you know, on my, those two things help me kind of express that to you guys.
Mm.
Do any of our participants have questions, or
there have been
anybody?
some comments, but not any questions. So if you're on and you have questions, please ask them. And John, do you want to, because what do you feel like? What do you want to add, or do you have questions? I know we're already like 1 hour and 11 minutes, but maybe a little, like 10 more minutes. Maybe.
Yeah, I'd love to really just reflect on what has been shared, and perhaps that's an opening for more sharing. I'm not certain, but Bella, I thought your response and your expression in responding to your experience and the energies that it woke up inside you, or you became aware of, that were already there, maybe already awake. It really led to a beautiful sort of perspective of bringing all of the information from this perspective, the perspective being shared from Simone's experience. And as I am listening to it, I'm like, wow, this is so not like specific to one individual. This is like a wide open expanse of consciousness. And I really thought, Bella, that your reflection brought that expansiveness into a very clear individual awareness of what was being shared. And then, of course, it led to another aspect of answer, that there were many parts that came up that I was like, oh yeah, it was making me laugh, because some of it is precisely the language that I have experienced and created in order to describe the access, in that the heart is the access point to these perhaps higher layers of consciousness, that the process of acknowledgement, acceptance, when they were talking about that, those are some of the exact same principles that I landed on in, like, okay, we have these ideas about what love is and what love isn't. Like, that person didn't call me back, that's not loving, you know? And when I began to become aware of soul consciousness frequencies, I was like, some of these perspectives about love don't quite jive with these other frequencies. Like, what if the person didn't respond because of some good reason that they needed to explore for their own pathway and expansion, you know? And I was like, what are these qualities that we can kind of like understand with our minds and wrap our minds around? And, you know, some of those qualities of love are acknowledgement, and allowing, and just as was being shared. And so I guess maybe maybe there isn't. Well, I want to throw it out there anyways, just because it's been brought up so many times during our conversation, is the focus of the energy within the heart and the going within and loving ourselves and as we love others and all of these topics. I'm wondering if this soul identity consciousness, the male and female together, or the male aspect or the female aspect, has some comments about the experience of love from this level of consciousness, in terms of like, can you describe love in a way that is unique to this soul identity experience, as opposed to maybe the million different ways that individuals in a body might perceive an experience of love? Is there some communication that you have about that topic in general or specifically? I mean, this is pretty open, but I just feel like the answers have been like that.
Well, they as you were talking, John, Bella, they were referring me, they were showing a picture of what you described in a conversation you and I had, where you were talking about the trigrams and the heart being the glue. And they would be very happy for you to share that wisdom.
Yeah, so I think some of the people that are going to watch this are already a little bit into the I Ching and the hexagram structure and these things. So the way that it was shown to me, because usually when Richard Rudd, who created the Gene Keys, when he speaks about it, he speaks about the hexagram lines as the chakras in the body. So the first three would be the root chakra, the sacral chakra, and the solar plexus, and then the fourth line would be the heart. The fifth line would be creativity, expression, the throat chakra, and the sixth line would be the third eye. So that's the way that we speak about it when we do the golden path, for example, in the Gene Keys. And what I was shown, and this is also part of why I was asking what the challenge was for humanity right now, because for me, a lot of what's being shown right now is that it's almost like the conductor in the first density in layer 1, 2, 3 are the emotions. And the electricity is always the heart, it seems like, but the conductor is the emotional. So what I've been experiencing is part of that bliss body. And in that experience of like kind of that peacefulness where that we were speaking a little bit about, what was shown to me was a new way of looking at hexagram structure. So the first three layers would be the three first chakras. But then in the middle, basically the third chakra would be kind of the willpower. It wasn't really the emotions. So that was the first three. The emotions were not really part of it. The heart was not part of it. Instead, layer 4, 5, and 6 was the expression. The sharing could also be the sharing in the fourth layer could also be the sharing from the throat. And then the fifth layer is a lot about the mental and the seeing and the solutions and the universality. And then the sixth, that's what Ra always said, and that's what they say in the I Ching. The sixth layer is not really part of the hexagram. It's already overlooking to the next hexagram. So it's actually outside. So that would be the crown chakra. And what I was shown was, by being in the emotions, which are the conductor, and in the heart, which is the electricity, was that basically that was the glue. And I understand from today's conversation that it has to do with the body too, because I was seeing this in the body structure. So when you have the body structure and you have the heart, that is a sacred marriage, basically. And then the conductor, the way that it can move, the glue, are actually the emotions, but not emotions in the sense of like getting lost and drowning in emotions, but just that the movement of emotions, kind of the watery, that when we see like what things can move with, and it's almost like it's amplifying, because a conductor, like you have like copper, and then electricity can move better. So that's what I'm seeing. And this moves, like this also actually makes me see something of what we're spoken about today. And it's like, for me, this conversation today is showing us look for sacred marriage in everything. So what I am seeing in what we are saying, and this, the left brain doesn't like this, because the left brain wants to say, that's lower frequency, that's the higher frequency, can't be sacred marriage. But what I am seeing is a density 1, it's a lower density. Yeah, it's more dense. So that's the form, and that's the body. And then the lighter density, which is 4, 5, 6, the love, it's like, it's all hologenetic, but it's more about the love, the heart. So these two, layer 1 and 2, are also a sacred marriage with each other. And you could also maybe see that there's more movement somehow in the first layer. So that would be a more male, you can see, and then the other one would be more the heart and the embrace. So there's like, it's showing me start to look at sacred marriage everywhere, and also reverse the pole. So if you think, oh, action is absolutely masculine and stillness is absolutely feminine, do that and then reverse the poles. And there is something in that reversing that is like that spin that you're speaking about. Suddenly it's like, wow, you become multidimensional. And that's the same thing with the layers. Like, you can absolutely speak about them as Richard Rhodes speak about them, but when you shake around the system and you see it from another vantage point, then suddenly you're opening up yourself to like the non-judgmental part, because that's where we get stuck in the first 3 layers. But when you overcome that judgment, duality, good or bad, then suddenly, then there's so much possibility. And that's what I'm seeing in what, the playfulness of it. And I don't know, I feel like I went out a bit, but for me, that is it's really kind of the message for it. Where can we find sacred marriage? Where we are on the first layer, on the 6th layer, because that's the energy and the conductor of the spiral, and that's the ascending spiral. So that's how the geometry looks for me right now in this moment.
They were showing me tons of geometry. So as you were talking, it was like a triangle, and with 3 bars, and each bar was a different color. And then the infusion of that heart, it not only goes between the layers, but it creates a field around it. And at the minute I said, oh, a triangle, then they pivoted it. It was a pyramid, and then the top became the bottom, and the bottom became the top, because there's no, and then the force field around it. Then they were showing me like the upper chakras or upper trigrams, right? And the same thing. And then it's a pyramid, so there's no, there's. And then that force field of the heart around it, and then they were showing me them coming together, and and they were everywhere. So it was like DNA everywhere, so it was really beautiful as you were talking.
What you were just saying, Simone, it made me actually think about an experience that I had of perspective on space and time that your description is very similar to. There's no up, there's no down, or once you orient to an upside, you may take it in and integrate it, but then it'll completely go like this. And I thought about it from this perspective of where there are some people that you may encounter, and there may be some people watching that are like, the first dimension is really just a point, and the second dimension is a line, and 3 dimension is space, and the 4th dimension, well, that's time. And when you describe this triangle with the lines inside and the heart, which is connected to the 4th layer, infusing it suddenly became this experience that could be explored from all of these various perspectives. And that actually reflects the more quantum relativistic perspective of modern science that says time is an illusion, that it's not a linear activity. It's a holistic experience that can be viewed from a variety of perspectives. And for me, anytime I had in the past witnessed people who are having a discussion about what do the dimensions mean, and somebody wants to get really blunt and say, well, the 4th dimension is just time. It's as simple as that. And my response to that was usually like, that seems incredibly exclusive for my understanding of it. But now, from this perspective and the pictures you were describing, it perfectly fits in that, yes, the fourth dimension is in fact time. And my personal experience of viewing time is that it can be viewed from the perspective of consciousness in all these different ways. So I love how that brought something into my personal awareness that I've seen a lot around in these kinds of discussions. So,
well, and as you were talking, they brought more. It was like when you were talking, I was actually aware of more of them in the field, and doing all of the things. So your awareness brought more awareness into the field. It was amazing.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah, resonance is pretty special.
So beautiful. Well, what do is it, where do we go from here? What's our...
I feel like we want to go back to the question that John was asking, because I feel like that's a bigger question, and there is some weaving with that, like what about love? How does it look? And I don't know if that's going to be the whole conversation, but I feel like that's the portal that we're going to open on behind the doors to come back and explore somehow. I also feel like there is integration in all these moving parts for all of us. I feel like there's like diamond for all of us that we're going to have with us, and that I feel we're going to come together and share with each other, and then see what wants to be shared in our next conversation here.
I have a feeling that Simone, with your gift of being able to, with specificity, tap into a specific frequency layer, that we may be able to access perhaps something along the lines of the source of our experience of love, and or at least maybe from within this soul perspective. But that's what my sense is in terms of a direction that we could go to assist in addressing this question or the topic from a specific way of understanding.
Well, they say they're happy to go into a layer, but they feel that the wisdom that comes through is more comprehensive and complete from the density where they're all working together. So they said they'd rather, they suggest that we go to the density and then ask questions about the layers from within the density of consciousness. They say it's just a suggestion. We can but they're showing me that if we go to just a one specific layer, that we're gonna it's like we can only get that layer, whereas they can communicate, they can have a conversation from the whole density. And so it goes back to all those little
right.
They would rather come to us with through the completeness, but we can go anywhere within once we're there. So they welcome us, which however we feel most called to explore.
Beautiful.
So, well, Bella, or any we're good. All right. So thank you guys so much for joining us for this at our table to have this conversation about the architecture of the soul and consciousness. We so appreciate you. And if you're enjoying these, join us next week live, Tuesday, 6:15, 6:15 Pacific, 9:15 Eastern. And we're going to sign out. I'm Simone, Quantum Shaman, Soul Whisperer, John Rhodes, Bella Krystal, and thank y'all so much. Take care.